On today's show, Spencer German stops by. We're going to talk about all the moves that the Cavs made this offseason. Plus, the folks over the Locked On NFL channel did something that I want to steal. So I'm bringing in the host of Locked On Browns to do just that on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and you might know me from my time covering the Cavs, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. Joined today by Spencer German, who does a great job over at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI, as well as 92.3 The Fan, and of course, is the host of the Locked On Browns podcast, which should be your second listen today on Friday, July 25th. And thank you for making this your first listen. You can find our show anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating and leave us a nice review. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. As I mentioned, Spencer German does a great job over at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI, also is a coworker of mine over at 92.3 The Fan. So depending on what time of day you are listening to this on Friday, you could actually turn your radio dial right now to 92.3 The Fan and maybe potentially hear us. If it's between 6 and 10 a.m. Eastern, we are on 92.3 The Fan right now. Of course, we're recording this on Thursday night. But Spencer, I wanted to kind of do an offseason overview, and that's been a big part about what this week over at Locked On Cavs has been about, because the Cavs were not, the most active team this summer. I don't think anyone expected them to be the most active team, but in essence, I think they had 5 moves that are worth talking about. We're not going to talk about, drafting Sal Niang with the number 58 overall pick, just because that has no impact on what the Cavs are going to look like this upcoming season. I think that, there will be a time and place to talk about that, but that's not now. I look at it this offseason as 5, maybe 6 moves: trading for Lonzo Ball, signing Sam Merrill, signing Larry Nance, drafting Tyrese Proctor, letting Ty Jerome walk. And I guess we could throw into the organization signing Kobe Altman and his front office staff to an extension through the 2030 season. But before we dive into it, just overall, what's been your evaluation of what they've done this summer?
Yeah, I think, like, to your point, I think we all kind of went to the offseason understanding they were going to be a second apron team, which was obviously going to limit what they were going to be able to do anyway. Think about all the conversations that were had just about what does the second apron mean. We were all sort of trying to learn on the fly some of the real regulations and restrictions that it puts on teams. You even heard GMs around the league talk about how, like Brad Stevens, notably with the Celtics, like how they were sort of learning all like everything that comes with that. And the Celtics actually were a team that had to make some moves to get out from the second apron this summer. So I wasn't surprised that we didn't see a team that was like super active. I know we tossed around different trade scenarios where it's like maybe you break up the core 4. But I think understanding the restrictions they had, where they're kind of at as a team right now, everything that comes with that, I think Kobe Altman did the best he could to sort of make some tweaks in the margins and prepare this team or put this team in a position to chase that ultimate goal of winning a championship, which is going to be at the forefront of their mind next year. Because even as Donovan Mitchell said at the end of the season, right? Like, we could go 82-0 and nobody cares next year. Like, it is only about winning a championship. Now you can debate like how much these moves that we're going to get into impact that goal, if they were good moves to help that goal. The Ty Jerome thing was pretty controversial, so we can talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I think given what they had from a resource standpoint, I come away feeling pretty happy with the moves that they tried to make and the way that they tried to just tweak this roster to try to get over that hump. And they're trying something a little bit different with some different players and parts. And I think they, tried to accomplish that goal the best that they could.
Right. And I do think too, they might not be as good of a regular season team this upcoming year as they were last year. I mean, they won 64 games. And I think if they take a step back a small step back. I'm not saying that they're going to drop to 45 wins. Like, that's not what this team's going to be. They're going to win 55 plus games, in my opinion. But if they take a small step back in the regular season in order to take a step forward in the postseason, I do think that could be part of the way, maybe not the intended consequence of some of these moves, but I do think that some of these moves could maybe lead to some drawbacks in the regular season, but could show their benefits in the postseason. Ultimately, Spencer, like, I think that's what this all has to be about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so to use the Ty Jerome thing as an example, like Ty Jerome was phenomenal throughout the regular season for this team, especially. And my guess is, as they evaluated whether or not they wanted to bring him back or not, and understanding where they were financially and how much they wanted to go into the tax to pay certain guys, I'm assuming they kind of looked and said, okay, is this somebody who helps us get over that hump in the playoffs, or are there ways that we can get better? And that was kind of the premise behind everything that they did from there. We talked a ton about adding pieces, adding veterans who have some playoff pedigree, who have been in this league for a long time, who know what it takes to win that time of year. I think that's what the Larry Nance move is about, right? Like this team's needed a backup big for quite some time now, and you get a guy that can do that and play some other positions for you as well, and who's familiar with the organization, with the culture, obviously, and he kind of accomplishes that. He checks that box for you. So yeah, I 100% think there could be some drawbacks in terms of like what this team looks like in the regular season. But, I think it's the unfortunate part of the NBA to a degree is the players themselves have made it feel like the regular season doesn't matter that much, especially with some of the load management stuff. I think everyone kind of goes into it understanding, it's about the playoffs, and especially with a team like the Cavs that now 2 years in a row have gotten bounced in the second round and you have high expectations for. It's going to be more about the playoffs than ever before. And so, yeah, like I hate that you go into a season almost where it feels like people are going to sort of not be as excited maybe about the regular season, and it's going to be just kind of marching towards March and April and May. But at the same time, if that means you win less games, but then you advance to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think people will take that trade-off when push comes to shove.
Yeah, and I do wonder what the trade-off needs to be. Like, I think it probably needs to be the NBA Finals rather than the Eastern Conference Finals, but that's probably a different discussion for another day. But I do want to dive into some of the moves that they made. So I mentioned the 5 like transactional ones. I think that we don't need to spend time talking about Kobe Altman and the rest of the front office getting the extension they got. Like, I think that was well deserved, but I don't think that's something that affects whether or not they win basketball games next season. Like, I just don't think that has an on-court effect for next season. I think it's a good thing for the organization, though. So of the 5 that I've listed, trading for Lonzo Ball, signing Sam Merrill, signing Larry Nance Jr., drafting Tyrese Proctor, and letting Ty Jerome walk, what is the move that you liked the least of those 5, Spencer?
I think of if I'm picking my least favorite of these moves, I probably would put Ty Jerome there, let walk. And it's not to say that it won't necessarily pay off, but I think like sitting here even today, several weeks removed from the trade they made for Lonzo Ball, which I think was the sort of symbolic end to Ty Jerome is going to is going to not be here next year. I do think like by addition by subtraction, I have questions, right? Like I need to see proof of concept with the new the new roster they sort of assembled here before I can fully know, hey, yeah, this was worth it, because Ty Jerome was so important to this team last year. 6th man of the year candidate, as we know. His offense off the bench was so valuable to this team at certain points in the season. I understand that in the postseason, it kind of disappeared in that Indiana series. And then he had his best game was really the last game he played against them in Game 5. And so it seemed like he maybe found something there. And I do think ultimately like his performance in the playoffs is what led to them ultimately deciding, let's move on from him. But we found out later they didn't even really offer him a deal. Like they didn't even really put a deal on the table in front of him. So they seemed pretty, convinced that this was something that they were okay letting happen in order to bring somebody else in. And that person is Lonzo, which we'll get to. But I do think like right now, I do worry about what losing that spark means for this team until I see in action what the new setup they have looks like and how it all sort of comes together.
So I do understand that entire line of thinking, because Lonzo, like if Lonzo didn't come with the injury risks that he just inherently comes with, because he's played 70 games in the last 4 years. And I do think that we've kind of forgotten that Ty Jerome has also played very few games over the last 4 years, because of injury issues of his own.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I do think if he came without those injury risks, we might look at those two moves a little bit differently than we do now. That being said, Lonzo probably also would not have been available for the low price of Isaac Okoro this offseason only. Like, I just don't think that's a trade that could have been made if Lonzo wasn't coming with some injury red flags. That said, I do think the Cavs, when they started making their moves, and the Lonzo Ball trade was the very first one they made this offseason, I think they were operating under the idea that Ty Jerome was going to get more money from another team than he ultimately got. Like, I think that the Cavs expected Ty Jerome to get roughly $14 million, roughly the mid-level exception. And I think that they had made the decision, we're not going to offer Ty Jerome the mid-level exception, but sort of a, hey, best of luck, congratulations on getting paid type of situation. Now, obviously, Ty did not get that amount of money. So the Cavs were operating in not the reality, I guess, because he didn't make that amount of money. But I think they went through a lot of their offseason thinking, okay, well, we can't necessarily get Ty for 14, but could we get Sam Merrill and Lonzo Ball combined for 19? Like, is that better than paying Ty Jerome $14 million? So I do think that you almost have to look at it in the aggregate. But I think of all the moves that they've made, there are two that I look at and say, yeah, that one could be looked at as that hurts you. And Ty Jerome walking away, I think, is one of those two moves, because he is, listen, I think he had a great offensive season. I don't know how real it is, considering it was the first year where he was a very good NBA player. Like, if it keeps up, he's going to look like a bargain at $9 million for the Memphis Grizzlies, but we don't know exactly what that's going to be. So I do think there's a little bit of risk on both sides of that deal, both either paying him $9 million, which I think is probably fair value for him, or letting him walk away.
Yeah, listen, I think you're 100% right in terms of how you're sort of viewing it. The money part of it is I think an important line for people to remember too. Like, you're basically paying slightly more than what you thought they were going to pay Ty, and you're getting two players out of it, right? Like, it's kind of like a 2-for-1 in that way. And yeah, that's the thing that I fall back on, though, is to me, sitting here today, I feel like by losing Ty Jerome, the team is worse. But that's also before I get a chance to really see Lonzo go out and play and see if he can stay healthy. And that's the big question mark, right? Like, if he stays healthy, I think fans will quickly be accepting of Lonzo and feel like, hey, this was the right move. Like, I'm not going to say they're going to forget about Ty Jerome, but I think they'll be losing him will feel a little less sting. Like, there won't be as much sting to it. But we have to see it first. And I think fans have to see that Lonzo can actually stay on the floor, which has been a big question in recent years of his career before they get to that point. So I'm with you that the Ty Jerome move definitely feels like one that in the immediate right now hurts the team, and it's kind of like a wait and see thing from here.
Yes, and we will dive into the other 4 moves that the Cavs made this offseason. Plus, Locked On NFL did their Mount Rushmore for every franchise. Spencer put one together for the Browns. We're not going to talk about that, but we are going to put together one for the Cavs coming up later on today's show right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the very last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe right now is game day and you suddenly realize that, you know what, you don't want to be just sitting around when the baseball game's going on. You want to be in the stands. Well, that is exactly where Game Time comes in, because it is the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. Plus, with some of the money that you save on your tickets because you went with Game Time, maybe you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group of fans to come with you. Game Time makes all that possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. Plus, they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying those tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off that first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Spencer German cannot stand that the Cavs allowed Ty Jerome to walk. Spencer, what was move number 4 on your list? Out of 5, what was the 4th one for you?
Yeah, I would for me, I'd probably put the Tyrese Proctor draft pick 4th. And it's nothing against Tyrese Proctor. I think he has a chance to be a role player in this league in some capacity. I know you were there in Vegas, or actually, were you there for the last game in Vegas where he dropped 35? Were you still there for that? Okay.
I was, yes.
Okay.
I unlike your co-host Spencer Davies, I was able to actually watch the Cavs in person, unlike him, because just a word of advice: never fly with that guy. Don't get on a plane.
Did you
with
fly
Spencer
out there
Davies.
with him? Did you fly out there with him?
No. His flight got
okay.
canceled. I got there on time.
Oh no. Okay. Well, good advice moving forward. But yeah, so you got to see the beginning of the legend that is going to be Tyrese Proctor now that I have him as my fourth on this list here. And again, it's nothing against him. I just the reason I put it forth, I think, for me is I'm not sure Tyrese Proctor is going to be making an immediate impact on this team next year. Like I think it's going to sort of be this learning curve. I mean, he's a second round pick. You're not really counting on anybody in the second round contributing immediately. Maybe if at all, like it's kind of like a wait and see approach with him. And I think there's other players that, based on what the Cavs did this offseason, Jalen Tyson most notably, who will have a bigger role this next year. But I don't think Proctor's necessarily going to have an immediate impact, have an immediate role on this team. And so for that reason, I just have it a little bit lower, because I think the 3 moves I have above that actually impact the team next season in their pursuit of a potential championship, obviously.
I think that's totally fair. I think in a perfect world, Tyrese Proctor impacts the Cavs at a certain point, but I don't think in a perfect world the certain point is this year. Like, I think a year from now, and I do think that with the way that you have to build a team with the second apron that we've talked about so much, you have to hit on low-cost talent. And Tyrese Proctor, where he was picked, is low-cost talent, the same way that Sam Merrill was low-cost talent, and Dean Wade still is low-cost talent, and Craig Porter Jr. is low-cost talent. Even Jalen Tyson is low-cost talent. You have to hit on some of that, and Tyrese Proctor hitting on that, I think, would go a long way for the Cavs. But I'm with you. Like, while I think it was a good pick, I just don't think he's going to have nearly the same impact on the 2025-2026 Cavs as the other 3 guys that we're going to talk about here, Will. So who did you have number 3?
Number 3, I'd probably put the Lonzo Ball trade. So here's the thing. I contemplated, like, would I have this move higher? Because I actually do think this move made a lot of sense for Cleveland from a number of fronts. And you laid out some of this earlier. You know, it only cost you trading Isaac Okoro basically straight up for him. You didn't have to give up any picks. There was nothing else involved. Money swap wise, like, it all matched up. It was good. And I think, like, Lonzo is the type of playmaker you're looking for, especially for that second unit. And with the Darius Garland injury, assuming Lonzo's healthy to start the year, he's probably going to be in the starting lineup, believe it or not, to sort of start the season. So we'll see what that kind of looks like. But yeah, like I like this move if I know Lonzo's going to be healthy. Like, if you could guarantee me he's going to be healthy for all of next season and into the playoffs, then I'd be like, shoot, make this number 1, right? Like, and forget about Ty Jerome. Like, it doesn't matter, but I can't guarantee that. And so it is a little bit of a gamble here. I understand what the Cavs are doing, again, with the premise in the context of where they are financially. They had to sort of make these moves. You mentioned low-cost moves. They had to make a move that was sort of in the margins, and they couldn't be big spenders or go take, like, the big swing on somebody. So I think this move makes sense. It gives you something that you need. It fills a void left by Ty Jerome, and it could work out incredibly well for this team. But again, I have to see it. And so for that reason, I have it in the middle, I think, of this group of moves we're talking about.
So I probably have it a little bit higher than you, because I like Lonzo Ball as a player. The health thing is the only question I have. Like, I think he is a perfect fit. I think he is everything that Kenny Atkinson wants in a second unit guard. I think when we hear from Kenny Atkinson publicly next year at Media Day, I think he's going to gush about Lonzo Ball. Like that is and I don't even think that's a bold prediction because I just think knowing Kenny a little bit and knowing what kind of players he likes, Lonzo Ball is just the perfect Kenny Atkinson player. So I think if you could guarantee health the way that you just brought, I think that we are thinking, okay, well, did OKC, like, are we going to Oklahoma City for the finals, or are we going
Book your
to
flight now.
maybe Houston, or where are we flying for the finals? Like, if you can guarantee health for this team, I think that's where you're at. And like Lonzo is part of that. It's a giant question mark and you cannot guarantee it. But if he's healthy in the playoffs, I think that he gives the Cavs a different version of themselves that they can tap into that they need to have in the postseason. I think that's why I like it so much.
I think your head's 100% in the right place. And I agree with everything you just said in terms of how he fits being a Kenny Atkinson style player, what they're looking for on that second unit. And like I said, I mean, going back to the Ty Jerome part of this, like, I think they watched Ty Jerome in the playoffs and they said, yeah, like he was really great for us. He was a spark for us this season, but I don't know if his game is what we're looking for that time of year. And I think they think Lonzo's is. And so I can wrap my head around that. And that like, that's the funny thing about it. I would have this higher if you were guaranteeing me the health thing. But I think as I look at it, it's like, listen, Lonzo is everything I would want for a player for the Cavs, especially on the second unit, where I'd be like, yeah, put it. No, I guess I describe it like this. I'm excited about the possibilities of Lonzo Ball with this team, where I'm like, love it, but I'm also nervous about the possibilities of him maybe not playing as much as the Cavs would need him to. And so for that reason, it kind of felt like the middle was the perfect place for this move to land, because there's kind of like that push and pull on both sides of where it could potentially end up for the Cavs when it's all said and done.
I think that's fair. And also I admire you for trying to mimic Spencer Davies and just trying to ride the fence on something, because that's the thing he does better than anybody else.
He is very good at that. I've learned from the best, I guess, at riding the fence.
Exactly. We've got 2 left to get to, plus our Mount Rushmores. That's next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. And at Epicor, the All-Stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things that we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, Epicor will equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hard-working minute, and easier doesn't cut corners. Easier takes the lead. Discover your success at easierwithepicor.com. Again, that is easierwithepicor.com. Thank you again for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, if you're watching the show on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest from Locked on Cavs. And Spencer, we've got 2 more moves to get to before we get to our Mount Rushmores. But what do you have as your second favorite move that the Cavs made this summer?
Yeah, and this might surprise people, but I have the Sam Merrill re-signing as my second favorite move. I get it. That was the first sort of domino to fall in losing Ty Jerome. And I think there was a lot of Cavs fans who were like, they paid him, but not Ty, who maybe had a more impactful season last year. But when push comes to shove, man, like I've talked so much about how I think a lot of these decisions came down to what they saw in the playoffs. And Sam actually played really well in the playoffs, especially on the defensive end. I understand the shooting wasn't maybe up to par in what you're looking for from him. I think there were some moments for him in the postseason where he was knocking down those shots. And I anticipate that they're expecting with this new contract that he will get there. He will be ready to knock down those shots next year in the playoffs. But his ability to step up and make some plays on defense, provide a little bit of a spark for this team. They sort of, I think, saw that he can be a two-way guy for them that time of year, and that's valuable. Plus, even if he's not knocking down the shots, just the threat of having somebody who is a sharpshooter the way that Sam is, I think matters to this team, helps you space the floor. You can do so much off of that. And so I do like that they're bringing Sam Merrill back, because we talked for so many years in a row, Danny, about this team not having enough shooting, not having enough of these, these wing players that can do a couple of multiple different things for you and play both ends of the floor. And so having somebody like Sam in this lineup that can give you a little bit of everything, I think is super, super valuable to them.
Yes, and I think it was a reminder of how valuable monetarily movement shooting is, because Sam is not just a good shooter, he's a movement shooter that has a lot of gravity, and those are more difficult to find than guys that can just put the ball in the basket from beyond the three-point arc. And two, if you listen to the show, if you listen to, Kenny Atkinson's post-game press conferences after games, or his pre-game press conferences, probably more apt here. But when Sam Merrill gets asked about, what's the first thing he brings up with Sam? It's always his defense. It's always what he thinks of Sam as a defender, because I have asked Kenny questions about Sam as a movement shooter and how impactful that is. And he will begin his answer talking about Sam's defense. And I don't care about that. I want to talk about his shooting. I want to talk about what he does offensively, but he wants to make it known that Sam is on the floor because he's a good defender and he believes in him on that end. And I think that the similarity between this move, trading for Lonzo Ball, and letting Ty Jerome walk is that the two guys they either obtained or retained are both guys they look at as two-way players. And Ty Jerome is not somebody they look at as a two-way player. And I think that is why we are in the position we're in with this team.
Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on. The playoffs, I think, were a telling litmus test for this organization, for Kenny Atkinson, for the front office of okay, who can fit into what we want to do this time of year and who can't. And unfortunately for Ty, he picked the worst series, the worst time of year to have his worst games. And here's the thing, it wasn't just that he had a hard time defending, Neesmith in that series and others. It was also that his shot just wasn't falling anymore. And once he lost that, I think it was all bets are off for his future. I think it was a very telling, moment in his career, in his season. And so, yeah, I understood why ultimately they decided to put the money in Sam's pocket instead of Jerome's, because of what you said, him being a two-way guy, and that showed in the postseason.
So that means, number one, you have Larry Nance Jr. returning to Cleveland.
That's correct. Listen, I love Larry Nance. He was great the first time he was here. Larry Nance, I should clarify Larry Nance Jr. because both Larry Nances obviously played here. But this isn't his dad.
Well, if they are bringing Larry Nance back, I don't like that move as much. I don't think he has as much left in the tank as his son.
I would agree with you on that. But no, Larry Nance Jr., he was awesome the first time he was here. Great for the culture. Guy who has been battle tested. I think about players who, as we've talked so much about finding this team, the players that can be tough and gritty and give you that extra sort of energy and attitude in the playoffs. I think Larry Nance Jr. is going to bring that to the table. He's also, I think for him stems from a place of how much he loves Cleveland. He would do anything for this city. Even when he was in New Orleans, he was talking about Cleveland all the time. So I think this was the right move for a team to get younger at that position. Because right now, previously, listen, as much as I know the city was Tristan Thompson was not a legitimate contributor to this team in that backup big spot. So it was just never going to be something that was viable. They added him for the leadership portion of it and all those things, but he was never really impacting things on the floor. And Larry gives you a little bit of both of that. He's going to be able to play. He's going to be able to give you something on the floor, and he has that attitude and that personality that you're kind of looking for. So I thought from a culture standpoint, especially, this was a really good move for the Cavs to address a need that they've had the last couple of years.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that he's going to be a great fit. I think the fact that he can play alongside either Jarrett or Evan is a very good thing for them too. I think that is one of the things that they've been searching for in a backup big, is not just somebody that can play center. It's having somebody that can play alongside Jared Allen as well as alongside of Mobley. I think that's important. So one of the things you guys did over at Locked On NFL, and more specifically you at Locked On Browns, is you put together your franchise Mount Rushmore. And you put one together for the Browns. Everyone put together for whatever team they cover. We've not done this at Locked On NBA. I don't know if we're doing this at Locked On NBA. I know we are going to have our top 100 list come out later this summer, which, I've already submitted a number of different Cavs that I think should be in the top 100 across the NBA. But I don't know if we're doing a Mount Rushmore. So I wanted to go through this exercise with somebody who has experience in building a Mount Rushmore, because I've not done this yet. So here's what I have settled on 3 names, and I think I need help deciding on my 4th. But I'm curious, before I reveal who I have, do you have a Cavs Mount Rushmore too? Were you putting together your Browns and like, you know what? I should do this for the Cavs?
I can't say it came up that way, but when we talked about doing the show together and you mentioned you wanted to do it, I thought about it a little bit deeper. And I would assume any Mount Rushmore for the Cleveland Cavaliers has to obviously begin with LeBron James. If LeBron James is not on your Mount Rushmore, we're throwing it out. We're not paying any attention to it, because he is obviously the greatest player in franchise history, because he's one of the greatest players in NBA history as well. I would say I would assume most people would have Mark Price on theirs. I think that needs to probably be a thing as well. I would then probably lean Brad Daugherty being on it. And if that's where you're also at, I think this is where things get kind of interesting from here in terms of like who you put on next. Because listen, like Larry Nance Jr.'s dad, Larry Nance, is in this conversation, I think, for like one of the best Cavs of all time. I think Zydrunas Ilgauskas is part of in that conversation for best Cavaliers players of all time. You can maybe even make a case for Austin Carr. And by the way, all these guys I'm naming all have their numbers in the rafters, obviously, as well. But what I find so interesting, and it might be enough to get him on there, Kyrie Irving has the biggest shot in this team's history to win an NBA Finals. And I understand it was short-lived with Kyrie. I understand it was, that people thought that was going to go on for a lot longer than it did. He forced his way out. It kind of got ugly at the end, and it didn't go the way anybody wanted to when it all sort of dispersed like that. But I can't get out of my head that, like, we witnessed in real time, who, by the way, I think Kyrie still is one of the greatest point guards I've ever seen in the NBA. The way he was able to just dribble, like how incredible he was, and he was a great shooter, like all that stuff, the skill set he had, the package that he brought to the table. He's a phenomenal player on top of it. But to know that he hit the biggest shot in franchise history, I wonder if that's enough to almost accelerate him past some of these other guys that we're talking about to put him in it. There's probably some old heads out there that disagree and are like, if you don't have Larry Nance Sr. on there, like, you're doing it wrong. But I'm curious where your thoughts are on that, because I think Kyrie is in that conversation strictly because of that moment in time and how much he contributed to the only championship this franchise has.
So I think Kyrie is in my list of guys that I'm in consideration for my 4th spot.
Okay.
And as you might imagine, I have LeBron James, like that's in pen, that's in Sharpie. Like
yes.
if you are ever building a Cavs all-time list and LeBron James is not at the top, like you can just stop because your list holds no water. I have Mark
there's somebody
Price
out there who's mad he left the second time, and they're just like, he'll never be on mine.
And that person is a moron for not having LeBron on there. But that person probably does exist, but that person is a moron and they're wrong. I have Mark Price written in pen on my Mount Rushmore. I guess I should say like chiseled already in there, because that's how Mount Rushmore's like. I have Donovan Mitchell on mine. Because I do think, while he doesn't have the longevity some of these other guys do have, because he's only now been in Cleveland for a few years, I think he is the second best basketball player to ever play for the Cavs. I think he is better than Mark Price. I think he is better than Kyrie Irving. I think he's better than Brad Daugherty, who, sneakily didn't have the longest career. Like, he only played 8 years with the Cavs. Like his NBA career was not all that long. And like Mark Price, if you want to go by accolades, was a much more accomplished player from that team. And the fact that, there are 3 guys in Cavs history, I believe, that have been first team all NBA. It's LeBron, Mark Price did it once, and Donovan Mitchell did it. Mark Price made a couple of third team all NBAs. Like, Donovan Mitchell's made first team all NBA and second team all NBA as a member of the Cavs. Like, it's just him and LeBron in that category. So I've got him up there for that, even though the longevity just isn't there. I don't think that I have seen, other than LeBron, anybody better at basketball that has played for the Cavs than Donovan Mitchell. And I suspect that 5 years from now, we are having this conversation with Evan Mobley as part of it. I don't have him in my, others receiving votes because he's not hit that level of greatness yet. I anticipate he will. But I basically have one spot for Brad Daugherty, Kyrie Irving, or Kevin Love. Because Kevin Love sneakily has longevity too. He was in Cleveland.
He stayed here longer than Kyrie.
I know it didn't end the way we want it to, and I know he doesn't have the moment that Kyrie has, but Kevin Love was here for a very long time and had a very good career in Cleveland too.
Yeah, it's funny because like whenever I do this exercise, I always try to like show my respect for the older generations of Cavs teams. And so I try to make sure I cover all my bases there. And I hadn't even really thought at this juncture about putting Donovan in there yet because I don't like maybe it's just because like the accomplishments like on the floor like the postseason thing maybe is part of it. Like how they haven't gotten out of the second round. And so we need to see on an even grander stage what he does. Maybe if he had beaten the Pacers in that game 2 where he just went absolutely nuts, like maybe that changes my mind. He does have the 71-point game, obviously, which is the highest in Cavaliers history. So he's certainly in the record books already. He's certainly already done some things to garner respect and be in this conversation. But I think for me, like Donovan was still kind of at a place when we started, like when I thought about this, where I was like, he might be there eventually, but I don't know if I'm putting him there yet. And I think for me, it comes down to like the playoff stuff. So, but I like that you have him in there already. I agree with your sentiments that he probably is the second best player in Cavaliers history at this, like so who's played for the team. I think there's probably a little bit more that people want to see before they put him on their Mount Rushmore. And I think that's also fair. And it's always so interesting when we do this exercise because everybody has a different way they're like grading or deciding who makes it. And I think one of the things I always go to is like, can you tell the history of the Cleveland Cavaliers without this player? And, when you're doing only 4 players, that's, I know that's also the logic used for like the Hall of Fame, right? When you're only doing 4 players, you're obviously going to leave guys off that would tell the story of the Cavaliers franchise. It's just impossible. But, I don't know. Like, can we tell the story of the Cleveland Cavaliers history without Donovan Mitchell? I think there'd be a lot of people who would argue yes right now because of the shortcomings in the postseason at this point. And I do think they'll get there. I do hope they'll get there so we can add him to this list. But I wonder where other people are at with the Donovan Mitchell part of this conversation because I think it's a fascinating entry, and I do think he at least deserves to be in the conversation.
I think it's a very fascinating entry. And I think that the postseason stuff, when you look at this franchise as not having, I mean, obviously the LeBron era is so much different, but sure, it's not as if a lot of those other guys had the postseason success either. Like the 92 team went to the conference finals, but that's the only time they ever made it out of the second round too. So while we can talk about how great those days were, and those teams were awesome, I don't know that they were quite as good as the team that the Cavs just had. And I get it, they ran into Michael Jordan and that guy was pretty good. I'm not going to push back on that.
Right, yeah.
But they lost in the first round 7 times between 88 and 98. And they only made it out of the first round twice. And one of the times they did it, they lost in the conference semifinals. The other time they lost in the conference finals. So it's not as if that group has just some overwhelming postseason success too. Like, I think that has to be part of it.
Yeah, in my efforts to be thorough and really pay ode to the older generation of teams and players, I clearly neglected Donovan Mitchell, so that's on that. But I like to your point, like both Mitchell, Kyrie, like I think a lot of people would probably have the 3 that I mentioned in theirs, like especially older generations. And it might come down to like, are you putting Donovan in because he's Donovan, he's great, and he probably is the second best Cavalier of all time? Or are you putting Kyrie in because he was part of those runs to the finals and has the greatest shot in team history? Like there's so many different ways you can sort of slice this and go with it. But I think this was a pretty good discussion. I think we actually covered like all the bases on people who probably are deserving of the conversation. And I'd be fascinated to see what your listeners also think about this exercise and who they put in over who, and if Donovan is in at this point in their perspective.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. I'd love to know in the YouTube comments what you think. And of course, I think that this discussion might be a little bit different a year from right now. So maybe you and I will have to reconvene in about 12 months to have that same conversation. But Spencer, thanks so much for taking the time to jump on Locked On Cavs. If you want to listen to Spencer's Browns takes each and every day, make sure you make Locked On Browns your second listen. Or right now, if you're listening between 6 and 10 a.m., you can flip on 92.3 The Fan and you can hear he and I doing a show together because that's exactly what we are doing on Friday morning. But Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And we are on YouTube. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button for us as we get it out here. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'll be back next week talking more about the Cavs.